Well, hello there, beautiful shrimp people. In today's video, we're diving into a big question that I get asked like literally every second day, and that is, do cherry shrimp like this actually need a filter? Right, so let's break it down. It's not a simple, straightforward answer of yes or no, right? It really hinges on what you want to do with your tank, right? So let's break it down. So why would you consider a filter in the first place, right? So filters are the unsung heroes of an aquarium, right? Mine's in this tank like this look not that beautiful, they're pretty ugly. I wish I'd hid this a little bit better, but it is functionality over aesthetics. Why would you consider a filter in your aquarium, right? Let me give you the lowdown. Filters are the unsung heroes of aquariums, right? They do much more than just clean the water in the tank, right? So let's break this down together, right? So for example, we have our big, massive bollocks filter here in my Neocaridina tank here. And for me, guys, personally, this is what we're going to dive into here today, is for me personally, I go for functionality over aesthetics in my aquariums. But filters do a lot more than just clean the water in a tank as well. They give your shrimp places to graze on. They give your shrimp places to hide, especially the small ones when they're the most vulnerable. And of course things like filters like this one, for example, a sponge filter is 100% shrimp safe. So let's talk about the different types of filters that you get for aquariums. You have hang and back filters, you have power filters that sit inside. There's many different types. What's important here is that when you add a filter to the tank, you try and make it as shrimp safe as possible. Shrimp safe, oh my god, I found a word I can't say. You try and make it as shrimp safe as possible because all these filters have their pros and their cons. Most of them are not. This is something I see in a lot of people's tanks where they have, like for example, they will have a compartment filter and then they will have a grate up the top where it's just basically slats, open slats that go into a chamber and then it goes direct to an impeller, which means death for baby shrimp. So what you must do, guys, is you must protect your baby shrimp. You must add a sponge to, like for example, if you have a hob filter, it will have an intake that reaches down into the water like this. You must put a sponge filter over the suction end that pulls it into the impeller. It's the same with other filters. Don't have sponge, you can use pantyhose, which is women's tights. And all you do with them, guys, is you put your pantyhose into like a pot, boil it for a couple of minutes. You can cut the foot end off, right, and then you stretch the pantyhose over the filter itself. And then you can use something like a bit of string or cable tie or something like that, right? Just something enough to tie it so shrimp can't go in between the pantyhose and the filter itself. And that will make your filter shrimp safe. Alright, shrimp fam, I have had considerable experience doing tanks with all different types of filtration in my shrimp keeping history. I've kept aquariums for 40 plus years. I think I built my first one when I was like 8 years old. Yes, I am that old. I've kept shrimp probably for about 20 of those 40 years. And I thought I would share with you guys some of my personal experience in tanks where I have filters and where I have no filters, right? And they do all have their purposes, right? So you have a purpose for a filter in a tank, and then you can have a purpose for having a reason for not having a filter in a tank, right? So let's discuss them a little bit here. For example, for larger tanks, you're definitely better having filtration in the aquarium because what tends to happen, guys, you have a larger environment, you're going to have shrimp breeding much more regularly than you would if you had a small container, right? So if you have a small container, for example, just say you want a little vase, you want it to look beautiful, and you want it to be like aquascaped, and you want it just to be nice with a couple of shrimp in it, something like that, right? And it's not possible to put a filter in, that is fine as well. There's no right and wrong with this kind of stuff. What is important is that you must learn a little bit how these type of aquariums work that have no filtration, right? I have tried the Wallstad method a few times and I've had success, guys, with planted tanks, just a pure planted tank. You can make the most awesome looking planted tank that you can imagine doing the Wallstad method. It's basically a substrate and then you have an earth layer underneath and you have a substrate on top and you have plants and you just fill it to the max and you do almost no water changes and you just let the thing grow and take care of itself and it creates its own little ecosystem. That can work perfectly fine, right? But the experiences I had sometimes when doing this is things like cyanobacteria can run rife in a tank like this because there tends to be a lack of water movement in an aquarium like that. Cyanobacteria, as we said, it can absolutely devastate a tank, right? Some of the types of strains of cyanobacteria can actually kill your shrimp, right? It definitely smothers plants and kills them as well. I was lucky in that the way I combated cyanobacteria was to simply increase the water flow. I added a filter to my tank, increase the water flow and circulation in general, guys. Cyanobacteria doesn't like oxygenation, right? So if you have water flow, that increases the oxygenation in the tank, and cyanobacteria, for me anyway, it just got smaller and smaller and smaller until one day it just wasn't there, right? If you turn off your filtration in a tank like this, for example, you could probably guarantee eventually I will get cyanobacteria in here, right? And if you didn't know what cyanobacteria is, I'll try and find an image. It's basically a green mat covering of, it looks like algae, right, that covers absolutely everything in the tank. You get different ways of removing it as well. You can use antibiotics to remove it. Is it erythromycin or something like that? But the thing, guys, with antibiotics is it's not something that you want to use lightly. Just chuck it a tank and use it, right? So use it with caution, right? So there's many ways to do a tank. There's no wrong way. Let's talk about why I love filters, like sponge filters like this in a shrimp tank as well. Okay, so let's talk about the pros and cons of sponge filtration, because I absolutely love them. There's very little cons with sponge filtration, apart from they can look a little bit fugly like this. Let's break it down. Sponge filters, you have a massive area for beneficial bacteria to live on. They are absolutely fantastic for grazing areas, as we've said, for our baby shrimp and our larger shrimp. If any of you have actually ever cleaned out a filter into a bucket of water when you've done a water change, you can testify the power of sponge filtration. Just because they're driven by air doesn't mean that they're very weak or something like that, right? Which leads me on to something else right there. 100% shrimp safe. I think I mentioned that at the start of the video. You can literally take off your sponge, right, and leave it in the tank. Baby shrimp, adult shrimp, whatever else can crawl in through the holes and nothing will happen to them. They'll go on a little journey, maybe gets pushed out through the top and into the water column, but nothing will happen to them at all, right? The water is, it doesn't go through an impeller because it's just air driven, therefore it is safe for our little baby shrimp and whatever else. So what is right for you, right? And this is what you have to decide for yourself. What is your purpose of your tank? What is your purpose of your tank, right? If you want it just for a decorative tank and you're not bothered about breeding so many shrimp and you just want to see like one or two on the bottom, and then maybe you don't need a filter. But what you must do in that scenario, guys, is especially the Wallstad method, is you must make sure that your tank has gone through its cycle naturally as well. Right? In the Wallstad method, the cycling process tends to take a little bit longer because there's literally no movement in the tank at all. There's no water movement, right? So the cycling actually happens on things that are in the tank, like, for example, like gravels, anything that can house bacteria. You need to give it time to establish itself in the tank, and then it will start to work properly, right? And because even though there's no filtration in a Wallstad method tank, right, there is still some type of water flow, right? If you have a keen eye, you get yourself if you get yourself a magnifying glass and you look at the tank, right, look at the water column, right, there is a little bit of flow that you don't see because everything in the tank, right, there is like plants as an example, they actually perspire oxygen, right, and carbon dioxide, but you get the drift, right? So all these things like plants, all these plants around here, they give off something that floats to the surface as a gas, right? Therefore, they're creating their own little water current in here as well. Bacteria, they take up oxygen and whatever else as well, so they're drawing in stuff and they're releasing stuff, and then you will get like a natural flow of water in the tank that you can't quite see yourself, right? And guys, it's just like everything in life with water, right? You have colder water at the bottom, slightly warmer water at the top, and this water is always mixing. Different times of the day it mixes like this, right? So that is how you can get away with no filter in tanks where you don't have so many shrimp. I think they can look very, very beautiful, but as a shrimp keeper and as a shrimp breeder, I prefer to have a filter in my tank like this, just because I simply want to add a lot of food to the tank and breed a lot of shrimp.